Hi, everyone. I'm Alice Carter. I'm the innovation lead for the EdTech Hub and the AI Observatory. And I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so as we dig into this very important topic, unlocking learning outcomes in the age of AI. So before we get started, please note that we are going to be recording this webinar and we'll share the recording after as well. So for people who couldn't make it, we had a great number of signups, but we're hoping to share the recordings with people who couldn't make it. A couple of other things to note to interact with the speakers. We actually encourage you to use the Q&A function because we're going to be able to sort of sift through those questions and make sense of them and offer some answers in the chat if we can, or in the panel discussion in a bit. There's also a chat, as you can see, so you can please introduce yourselves. But like I say, asking questions using the Q&A function is ideal. So before we actually kick off, I wanted to just run a really quick poll to get a sense of the people in the room. And so it should come on your screen shortly. But the question in summary is, from the next slide, is when it comes to education and AI, which perspective do you bring? So hopefully you see that poll has just popped up on your screen. You see some kind of different options there. Take a look and let us know which of these perspectives do you think you bring? Oh, brilliant. It's so great. This is letting me know 30% of people have participated so far. That's wonderful. It's flooding in. And it's head to head. It's a room full of all of these things. Curious optimists, thoughtful realists, ambitious accelerators, and overwhelmed observers. It really is slightly ahead now on the curious optimist, but I'm really seeing that we're a very good mixture of these different perspectives. Which is great and really ties into some of the things we want to share with you today. So while we get the final 30% of people to answer as well, I'll let you know a little bit more about the AI Observatory. So the AI Observatory and Action Lab is an initiative which is designed to narrow the learning divide in the age of AI. We know that under business as usual, AI is set to broaden the learning divide. And we're really interested in the decisions we can make today that are going to change that trajectory. So our work has three components. It's an observatory that surfaces what's happening, what's not happening, and generating ideas and hypotheses for ways we can try and narrow the learning divide. We also have the Action Lab, which is where we'll actually test with partners some of those ideas and some of those hypotheses. And then alongside that, we're really focused on making sense of the evidence and publishing guidance, hosting events like this one, and sharing insight and staying in touch with people who are working alongside us in this phase of fast change. So we're hoping over the course of this hour to move many of you to that space of optimism. And I can see, 15 people said that they were already in this curious optimist space. We're hoping not to be blind optimism, right? But optimism about what's possible when it comes to effective and equitable learning for all in what is set to be the age of AI. So if you go to the next slide, that's really a summary of what the AI Observatory is all about, is intentionally designing for that effective and equitable learning for all in what is set to be the age of AI. So over the next hour, we'll share some of our findings from our first scan as the AI Observatory that we conducted over the last few months. If you can see here the lovely faces of some of the people in our team who will be helping us talk through those findings. So first of all will be Geeta, who's our futures lead, and she'll talk through some of the most interesting things that came up for us. And then she'll be joined by the rest of this panel, which is some more of our team members. There's Lee, who's the Director of Innovation for the EdTech Hub. There's Daniel Plout, who's our Evidence and Learning Lead, and Mike, who is the chair of our steering group, but also a visiting fellow from the Brookings Institute and on leave for the World Bank. So we're really delighted to have all of you here to help us dig into the findings and to help just to discuss it a little bit more. Towards the very end, we'll run a few more polls so that we can hear from you as well. But as I said before, I'd really like to encourage you to pop your questions throughout into the Q&A function so that I can do my best to feed them into the discussion. So that's what we have in mind. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Geeta to tell us a little bit more about what we've been finding.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Alice. And hello, everyone. Kamusta? I'm Geeta, the Futures Lead, originally from the Philippines, currently based in London. And today I want to share with you guys some of the 7 headlines we've learned so far from this work, including the things that, to be honest, have really, really surprised me. So I'm sure everyone's come here because we're all kind of curious or at least kind of overwhelmed with where AI is going. And I just wanted to say, I think we're finding that that's completely normal. You know, when there's fast-paced technology, it can feel very difficult to kind of keep up with where things are going. But to frame kind of our discussion today, I want to just remind us that at the end of the day, AI is a tech and a tool, but it's about the people. So the ones who use it, who design it, who research it, and the ones who harness it for better learning outcomes. So this frames us looking at AI from what we all bring to the table with all of our different perspectives, and some of the reasons why maybe some of these discussions feel really difficult at the moment. You know, for all the people who've tried to read a lot of things and keep up, or who've attended a lot of webinars, I'm sure we're not the first one. You know, there might be things that you leave and you're like, well, actually, what can I take from that? So I'm really excited to show you some of these things and some of the things that we're learning and framing that I think can help us have a more fruitful and practical discussion. So the first thing that we're really seeing, and you've already seen this through the poll, is that all of our different perspectives can sometimes mean that we conflate what's inevitable with what can be shaped. So let me tell you about first who we spoke to, and then why that kind of feeling of inevitability versus like feeling action oriented is coming up. So, as part of this work, we brought together a group of 42 diverse stakeholders from over 37 organizations across 22 countries. So, we really wanted a kind of broad view of the challenges around kind of learning in the age of AI through very different perspectives. So, we spoke to governments, funders, edtech entrepreneurs, big technology, you know, people in Asia and Africa, making sure we have, you know, real kind of breadth of voices in the room. And we structure those conversations around, you know, what's happening now, what are the real challenges people are facing, what's coming next, you know, what are the things that maybe we'll regret we didn't do when we look back 5 years from now, and therefore what's needed, what should we be doing today. And I think, as you've already seen, and we've got a great mix of people in the room, that we all bring different lenses to the same shared reality. So if we look at the next slide, we've already talked about, you know, who's a curious optimist, a thoughtful realist, an ambitious accelerator. And indeed, I can very much relate to the overwhelmed observer. And so one of the things we were seeing is that when we come together, we're really all having very different and overlapping conversations because of our different perspectives and maybe our different responsibilities and roles, and also our different kind of sense of like timing, you know, today, next quarter, next year, next 5 to 10 years. So even though we're going through the same shared reality, we're seeing it from very different perspectives. So what do I mean about that in practice? So if you go on to the next slide, I'm showing you some of the really interesting quotes we had from people in those discussions. So you have one same challenge, and this was about teachers, but you're having a lot of different perspectives. So you're almost what's great is that there's a lot of rich perspective to the same challenge, but then we have a hard time to come meaningfully to address it. So for example, when we were discussing teachers and AI, you know, people who are maybe more focused on the now are thinking, you know, digital literacy is a problem. The admin load for teachers is quite high. So, you know, if you want them to do something, they really don't have the time to do it. And I can relate because, you know, I've been talking to, you know, some people working with country governments, and they're also saying, you know, we really need to sit with HR departments more to help them get a grasp of what AI is. But then maybe some other people are like, well, actually, let's take all of those admin tasks off of people, so off of teachers, so they can focus on the teaching and get everything else handled by AI. And then over here, another conversation is happening where we're saying maybe we're heading into a golden age of teaching because maybe there's something about teachers and AI helping each other and working kind of in a more symbiotic kind of relationship. So again, very rich, but obviously we're all kind of tackling the same challenge, but not coming to a fruitful kind of conversation on therefore what should we do. So again, if anyone has ever been in those conversations where you're like, I feel like we're talking about the same thing, but almost like missing each other, this is kind of the reason why. Um, so another really interesting thing that we're learning on the next slide is also, I mentioned up front that it's all about fast-paced technology and how we're trying to keep up with tech that's basically changing kind of every month, every day, in fact. Um, and so therefore, because people are feeling the pull of that tempo, some people want to speed up, but others want to slow down. And I think what was really surprising for me, to be honest, is you'll kind of never guess who is who. So I'm showing you two quotes here. One's sharing that, they're rolling out full steam ahead. The other one saying, I think we might look back and kind of regret that we got really caught in the hype cycle of AI, integrated it into everything, and weren't more intentional about how it leads to better learning outcomes. And so I'll let you guys sit and maybe share in the chat, who do you think said like quote one versus quote two? And I'll let you guys kind of absorb and marinate in that for a bit. So quote one, they're saying full steam ahead, let's roll that out. Quote two is like, I think we might regret moving too fast. Someone in those discussions said it's kind of when, the toothpaste is out of the tube and you can't get it back in. So as you guys kind of think about, who said who, and maybe for some of you guys, you're already in these types of conversations. What was interesting is, you're absolutely right, Jake. Ambitious. Oh, well, no, it's actually interesting. I thought quote one was an ambitious accelerator, but it was actually from an overwhelmed observer, and it was from the government. So the reason why I say that is because there's such a driver of fear of missing out and fear of being left behind that's why they're like, I don't know how to engage with this, so I'm just going to go all in and I'm just going to roll things out straight away. And kind of, maybe that means I'll get there quicker, but then there are probably a lot of pitfalls that I'm not even thinking about it. And then on the other side was the other quote about the hype cycle was actually from an ambitious accelerator. Is from an ed tech entrepreneur who was like, this is great. The tech is enabling us to do so much more than it's ever done before. But I kind of need more guardrails because I'm almost afraid what we're creating without intention. So I think it's just interesting to see how different hats and different personas and mindsets are actually reacting in very, very different ways. So what does this all mean when it actually talks about kind of AI and education? And if we go to the next slide, I think what we're seeing is that not only are we bringing different kind of perspectives, we're also talking about maybe three different things and conflating it as the same thing. So again, kind of, I can't see you guys, but like raise your physical hands if you've ever felt like you're having a conversation about AI and you're not quite talking about the same thing. And I think the reason for that is we're actually talking about three different things. So there's a sense of there's AI for education. So if you see kind of, the first photo, people are really thinking, how can I integrate AI within existing systems and upgrade? So working within the kind of dominant paradigm, the classrooms are really busy, the teachers don't have any time, but we got to bring in, some AI tools and upgrade our existing kind of learning environments. The second kind of reality we're talking about is AI in education. So this is when, disruptions come in. So we're starting to see AI tools scaling and the change becoming more embedded within education systems. So these are no longer one-off pilots or kind of a collection of different activities. Things are starting to become kind of part of the being baked into the bigger picture. And then lastly, what we're talking about when we say education in the age of AI is actually transformation, not just of education, but of kind of life at large. So we'll start to see education being designed for a whole world where AI is just a normal part of our life. So if you kind of think of the before the internet and after the internet, it wasn't a choice for, say, education and learning to be like, I'm sure the internet will be in my life, but I don't think it'll really touch, kind of my learning environment. It's just something that's so baked in that it will start to kind of shape the whole conversation around learning. So I think with all of this, we're seeing two reasons why having this conversation is really tricky. One is that those different perspectives mean that we're talking about different entry points to solving the problem. Two, thinking about three different kind of paradigm shifts within AI and education means that we're maybe some people are talking about the now, some people are talking about the next, and some people are talking about the transformational future. So I think these are just some really helpful kind of things we've been spotting to try and bring people to the same conversation so that we can meaningfully create action initiatives and change. So what does this all mean? Are we heading to a bit of a dystopia of, I don't know, AI taking over the world? Um, and actually, I thought that was very interesting because, again, when we were having those qualitative dialogues, we learned that maybe we're entering a golden age of learning, and it's more about something that maybe is more familiar to us than we think. So, in one of the conversations we had, there's a great kind of reflection from the room that maybe we're hitting a golden age of teaching, where people and AI can come together, and it created this kind of rich discussion about challenging the current paradigm, which is based on, kind of an industrial revolution model of creating good workers, and maybe, some of the roots around what we know from religions with, with figures like Buddha or Jesus, where learning is fundamental to what they bring, and is not just about being confined in a kind of fixed school and classroom setting. So what we're saying is that the concept of teaching is firmly rooted in many cultures. And so while the act of teaching is sacred, maybe the role of the teacher could be reimagined in the age of AI. So two things. What's kind of stopping us? This sounds great. This sounds like maybe it's not as scary as I thought it was. But what are two things that are maybe blind spots that we could be addressing today? So one of the things that we're seeing, and it's on the next slide, is a big challenge is that education delivery system is underfunded. So one of the participants in our qualitative dialogue shared, one of the things we might regret is we didn't sit with government long enough to understand their problems and see how AI can be a potential solution. So I think while it's very exciting that there's so much funding and activity around the product space and investing in classrooms, what we're not seeing is behind the scenes, a lot of what's keeping the system going is still kind of stuck in the current paradigm, the today and the now, where there's a real potential for AI to support with some of that back end work that we see, for example, teacher allocations, predictive planning on classroom sizes. So those are the things that maybe AI could be really useful and helpful for. Another thing that's holding us back, and this is on the next slide, is some of the existing power dynamics. So currently, the paradigm is teachers are teachers need to be trained with all the tools that we're giving them, versus maybe should we design these tools with teachers so that they're useful from the outset and that we make it as easy of a lift for them as possible. So is this an opportunity to kind of flip the script? And again, someone shared, this is a unique moment for us to shift that around and for educators to say, look, these are the things that we need, not here's another tool that I basically need to be trained up on in order to use. So on to the next slide. I mean, what does this mean for all of us? How do we connect all of these dots of the things that we're learning about the people, the perspectives, the time horizons, and also the kind of the challenges where we could make a big difference today? And I think simply put, if we don't lift our gaze to what's on the horizon, we will always be in that hamster wheel catch-up mode and feel like we're being left behind. So I think the real main thing that we're finding is that we need to be thinking not just about today, but also about the tomorrow and the tomorrow that we want versus the one that I think people are feeling we're getting dragged into. so that then we can start to shape what are the equitable actions for learning that we can start implementing and testing today. So thanks so much. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll pass you back to Alice.
Thank you so much, Geeta. I hope I speak for many people in the room when I say that was really, really fascinating. I'd love to hear from your perspective one thing that really surprised you in these findings.
Yeah, I mean, I think what surprised me was maybe people's expectation that someone knows what's happening more than them. And I think the big secret is that we're all trying to figure it out together. So no one's ahead or left behind because literally the tech is moving so quickly and its societal impacts are so wide that I think it's more coming at it from curiosity and experimentation because things are changing very rapidly. And it's not about keeping up, it's about kind of staying aware and having a point of view.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And I wonder if we could invite to the virtual stage the rest of our panel, which is Lee, Mike, and Daniel. And actually, I think we can stop screen sharing so that people can just see our faces. Yeah, wonderful. So hopefully you can now see Lee, Daniel, Geeta, and me. And imagine we're on the stage sitting in front of you, and we're going to carry on the discussion with the rest of the team. So just before we dive into some more of those questions, I just want to say one more time what you will have just seen in the chat as well from Tyler is that you can add your amazing questions in the Q&A area. So if you haven't seen that, it's along the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a Q&A option. So click that, and then that will help us kind of gather the different questions that you have for this panel. So thank you, Geeta, for kind of kicking us off. I'd love to go first to you, Lee. What do you think of this kind of current wave of AI tools and investment, and is it aligned with the actual educational goals and needs that we have?
Thanks, Alice, and thanks everyone for taking part. Really eager to hear what you think of the 7 things that we discovered and get your feedback and input into everything that we're learning. Are the AI tools working towards the goal of learning outcomes in the age of AI? I guess some of them are, and we're seeing some interesting research and findings coming out from the work of many friends and colleagues in the sector. I think the thing that Geeta touched on towards the end about the kind of power dynamic and the role of teachers in deciding how these products are shaped is where there might be some interesting work for us to do. Over the course of this initial phase of horizon scanning, we had a number of conversations, right? You saw Geeta's slide with all of the logos and the folks that were kind enough to join us in discussions about what all of this might look like and how we might shape it for greater equity. And there were a few things that felt like they were completely consistent in the groups. There were lots of things that weren't consistent, but there were a couple of things that were ever present. And one of them was really about the role of the teacher in all of this and trying to flip that power dynamic, you know, the way that Geeta was describing it. Teachers are given these tools. We have to learn how to use the tools in the classroom. They're not always fit for purpose. And in one of the discussions, people were saying, you know, what we should do is we should map the life in the day of a teacher, day in the life of a teacher, and every single pain point that they have, and every single one of their kind of key wishes, hopes, dreams, and put that out to the sector to kind of design with and for and around. And there was a lot in a kind of similar vein around, you know, how do we surface teachers' needs and make sure that the hammers are looking for the right nails, essentially. So yeah, fascinating part of the discussion.
Absolutely, thank you, Lee. And we actually also had a question in the from the audience, Zainab, who was asking if how much of our research came across any use cases of AI in action in marginalized communities. And I wonder actually if I ping this back to Geeta or to Lee, because I feel it builds on kind of this view of where the tools are at right now. Do either one of you want to take that one?
I mean, I'm happy to share an example that we heard about through our friends at Talimabad, who were saying that, you know, even in very, very marginalized, off-grid, super rural places that you have to like basically get into the most ruggedized Jeep to even reach, they're finding ways to be connected to the internet through Starlink, and you know they're kind of hacking their way to make use of these tools. Why is that interesting to me? I think it speaks to that point of like what's inevitable, what's not inevitable. And some of these things kind of carry with them a momentum that feels unstoppable, even in the most unlikely environments. But I'd love to know what my colleagues think, if there are any other examples that they'd like to share. Mike, I'm sure you know a couple that might be worth citing.
Yeah, I think that thanks, Lee. Thanks everyone. I mean, I think the Tlemabot example is a great one. I think I do, which has been mentioned here, is a great one. I think the Rory chatbot in Sierra Leone is a great one. You know, the AIforeducation.org folks, which are part of the observatory here, have a great list of I think they just updated with about 300 examples from around the world. I'll drop that in the chat as a way to point to you know, things that are actually happening that you can actually test out and try out. A number of these things actually have. I was using the Rory chatbot feature inside WhatsApp yesterday just to reacquaint myself with it. And I think there are all sorts of great examples, especially things that are being built in places where they're being used, as opposed to things that are being built from somewhere else and imported. And as Lee said, you know, with a hammer trying to find a nail and not finding it, just smashing other things. So I see.
Brilliant. Thank you both. We've got a bunch of questions coming in to the Q&A now, which I'm delighted to see. I'm gonna take us in a slightly different direction. And Mike, while you've got the virtual mic, maybe I can come to you. You know, we're talking there a little bit about the opportunities of AI, the use cases that we're seeing. But you've talked about structural blind spots in AI adoption as well. And I'd love for you to just share a little bit about any risks you're seeing that are not being talked about enough.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And so I think a lot about risks. Yeah, and you know, Geeta started out by talking about, you know, the worry about conflating, you know, what's inevitable versus what we can shape. And I think there's a real risk there too, that some of this stuff we think is inevitable actually need to be to the extent that it is. Structurally, you know, this stuff, the models are being built somewhere else, using data from other places. There are all sorts of worries about, and I see some one or two comments in the chat about people worried about, you know, what if our data is taken and used and commercialized? And just to be provocative, I'll split that around and say, what if it isn't? What if there aren't data informing the development and how these tools operate from places who are actually using these tools? How should we be thinking about setting up ways to share in ways that are safe and equitable, but in ways that will inform and drive the development of a lot of tools? I mean, if you look at you know, the amount of content in the Common Crawl, which is an open source body of data from around the world that all the big language models have used. You know, there's almost no content in there from Africa. I mean, almost all the content is from the quote unquote global industrialized North. You know, most of it's in English, and they're real, I think, opportunities for us to think about how we can share data to inform the development of these tools. Because if we don't, what do we have? We have something that's built for somebody else and not for us. And this is one other risk, you know, there's so much hype around AI, yet at the same time, it seems like while the rhetoric is way up here, the reality in some cases is really about tinkering at the periphery. And where there are really profound challenges we have in places, and we're thinking about doing little things, let's save, you know, 8.2% of teacher time on lesson planning during this week. All those types of activities are good. I know that there are groups that do great work who are participating in today's webinar, but I do also wonder if there's a sort of a crisis of ambition, despite all the high rhetoric that we see around AI use, because a lot of it is just around tinkering, I think, and maybe that's okay at this stage, but I think we need to move that past that pretty quickly. One of the risks I'll say, you know, one, it was mentioned just to be provocative that, you know, there's a belief that, you know, AI can be used to reduce the admin load of teachers, which will free them up to do more teaching and more interaction with students. You know, there's a very real possibility that the exact opposite happens. in fact, that AI, the chatbot model, the interaction with students is even more looked to be mediated through a screen in ways, and teachers are left to do even more admin of the AI itself, admin of the data it throws off. So I think there's no, it's not inevitable that this would actually enable teachers to have more time with students. That is something that we have to decide to make happen.
I love that, this crisis of ambition, and I totally agree. It feels very optimistic to think that actually it's going to mean that people have a lot more time on their hands, and we kind of hope that, wish that for teachers, but is it really going to come to pass? Actually, Daniel, I'd love to come to you about this. Is that how you see it as well? Is there a crisis of ambition, or are there, you know, uses of AI that make you nervous? What's your view on this?
Yeah, thanks, Alice. I think to me, it's less about what use cases are really sort of problematic or make me nervous, but actually what they might lead to, some of the side effects that they could lead to. So I'll name three that I think in education systems are worth thinking about. One is the use of generative AI to produce educational content. I think all of us who are sort of engaged in social media these days, we can see the onslaught of AI-generated content left and right, often low quality and not really useful to anyone. That's being called AI slop. I think that kind of AI slop is being sort of invading other more legitimate channels of information. You can find full books written on Amazon by AI that don't have any sort of quality assurance around them. And so I think I fear a little bit about the AI slop invasion in education systems, where we sort of look at a trade-off between having no content to having bad content and decide that the bad content is okay and it's not great for curriculums or textbooks or to bleed into teacher development. And I think there's a real risk of us making that decision that kind of content can invade these systems in a way that's harmful. The second one is the use of predictive AI, I think, for specifically, which is less talked about than generative AI, predicted, and in some ways an older technology. Predictive AI uses data, machine learning to help make predictions about the future, decisions, resource allocation. It's been used a little bit in other sectors, like in healthcare system. It's actually led to some pretty harmful, when thinking about the use for allocating treatments for patients, it's been pretty harmful in some cases, to making generalizations or making up trends that are not quite helpful. And so if you bring that to education systems without adequate concern to allocate teachers, to allocate resources, to decide on learning paths for students, for instance, I think it can be helpful efficiency-wise, but it could potentially lead to some harmful side effects. And then just one more is the most common one, which is the use of AI for individualized, personalized learning that we talk about so much. There's a lot of promise there, clearly. But I think the same technology that can be used to track a learner's progress or gaps can also be used to surveil that learner about their opinions, about their speech. And if we think about, folks who are interested in monitoring, surveilling the voice of students in a particular political environment, that tool can be flipped to be used in a way that can be harmful. And so those are some of the worrisome ones, but again, it's not the use itself, right? Like I think you can use a hammer to build and you can use it to destroy things. And I'm less interested in sort of talking about whether the hammer should exist because it's here. I think that's why we're doing the work we're doing. I think it's interesting to really think about, how we help to guide decision makers in education to use these tools effectively, to use them ethically, to use them in ways that help to bridge equity gaps and not lead to some of these side effects.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And what I'm noticing in our panel, right, is the discussion has kind of moved from the use cases, what we see right now, to that more shifting along into what could be coming next and some of those risks associated. So I guess I wanted to those of you who have put in some questions in the Q&A, which are a little bit more around use cases in local and spoken languages or specific places, rather than kind of putting that to the group now, I'm going to suggest we try and type some answers or share links, or potentially share after the panel as well, just to allow us to move into a little bit more of this kind of what next part of the discussion, which I'm noticing the panel find you're going there, and I think we should. I'm gonna maybe go to you, Lee, and ask a question. A lot of what our work is doing is focused on decision makers like people in ministries of education. So if somebody from the education ministry was dialing in today, as they might be, what's one thing you'd want them to take away from all this?
Thank you, Alice. I'm now scanning names. I'm sure some of our friends from ministry, well, I would hope that they'd be in attendance. So what would I say to them? I think that there is a word that came up time and again in Geeta's presentation and in our conversations overall as well about moving with intention and with intentionality, which sounds really, really simple, but in a phase of significant technological change, actually being intentional about what you're investing in and the decisions that you're making can be very hard to do. And what we've seen is that because things are moving so quickly, there is this propensity to be stuck in a place of catch up. And so what I would encourage any ministers in attendance to think about is, what is the future that we could design towards? What is our vision of where education might go in my country in the age of AI in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? And what do we need to do today to kind of work backwards towards that goal and to kind of make sure that we're not just in a place of catch up? I'm going to start plugging for it now. This won't be the last time that people hear me plugging for it, but the presentation that Geeta shared is the kind of 7 top most interesting things that we discovered. But there is a lot of quite systematic and robust work that lies behind all of this. And there is a report that you'll be able to download at the end of this webinar. We have a little QR code that you can scan and take a look at the full findings. And we have decisions that you might want to make as a ministry if you want to focus on catching up and Horizon 1 kind of thinking, you know, how do we make sure that we're adopting these technologies, to how do we tackle the kind of phase of disruption that feels like it's coming next. And, you know, we're already seeing the groundworks laid for a completely transformed way of life in every way, including in education. So what are the ways that ministers can start getting ahead of that now? And there are a number of potential decisions and initiatives that you could take. And then the last thing I would say is just to kind of think about investing your time and your resources proportionately in those different goals. So maybe even if all you do is take 10% on thinking about 10% of your time and your money on thinking about what the future might ideally look like and what you can do to work towards that. That would be a sensible thing to do while you invest lion's share in upgrading your people and your processes today.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Lee. And hopefully we have people in the room who are, you know, scribbling away. But as Lee says, we'll also be sharing a report. So we'll share the QR code at the end of this so that people can look into more depth about exactly what we're seeing and these opportunities across these different horizons. I've just spotted a question as well in from Amy. You're kind of raising some of the ethical issues of AI, and we've touched on a little bit of that already. So I wonder if I can kind of wrap that in with a question to you, Mike, about the danger we're seeing of replicating the inequities of past tech waves. And, you know, this is particularly ethical issues around personal data, privacy, those kinds of things Amy's mentioned, which, you know, are not exclusive to AI. And I wonder if you could, you know, share your perspective on what it would take to overcome and leapfrog for some of those patterns this time around.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. And thanks, Amy. And I think it gets also the question, you know, whose ethics and whose ethical norms around privacy and sharing and, you know, the rights of the individual versus the rights of the whole, or the needs of the individual versus the needs of the whole. One of the challenges with a lot of these tools is they're built on a lot of assumptions from certain places or developers in certain places and then transposed somewhere else. And, you know, concerns about data privacy, for example, there are all sorts of cultural norms built inside that. The question, you know, and to what extent, first of all, should we be, how should we be worried about them, and how should we understand what we mean by privacy and what's actually important? I think these are perhaps a topic, well, a larger topic for the observatory to think about. But I think in general, you know, and maybe to be deliberately difficult, you know, the leapfrog metaphor, I think, is also really problematic in thinking about less the idea that, you know, a place, just because you inject something that is this deus ex machina, you know, this thing, that technology that comes down from heaven, and places can skip stages of development automatically, and the mobile phone is the defining metaphor for that. But, you know, you can't just skip. So if we look at Daniel talked about the dangers of AI slop, and you'd say, oh, we don't have enough digital content. We don't have a robust local textbook industry. And now we can just have all sorts of content created. Well, a textbook, for example, is something you see that you read, but there's a whole set of things that go into the development of that are really even more important, I would argue, in an age of where the appearance of content can happen at scale and at very low cost, around quality control, around alignment to curriculum, around making sure that there are whatever truth is, whatever accuracy is, and norms, and that have been embedded inside the process of creating educational content in the past, and to leapfrog sort of past those sorts of things, or the competencies and capabilities that need to be developed, I think misses really what's a lot of what's important, because you can leapfrog in the wrong direction. And I think if we don't acknowledge the types of infrastructure capacities and capabilities that need to be developed, and even more important, when part of us seems like we're jumping forward, I think we're in for as we have in earlier stages of technology development, for all sorts of challenges, some of which we could avoid. So it's a really general, high level, I guess, response to you. And I think in general, also, then the other thing that a risk or challenge is that, okay, that in the past, we've seen these really expensive technology tools and services developed, and would say, okay, well, if it wants to work in a poor community, we just cut off parts of it and make it cheaper, and that's what we have. And actually, what we need to be thinking about, and like the folks at 1 billion who work in Malawi, there are a number of people from Malawi here in the chat. I see, think about, actually, you need to actually add more in to your product and service. Maybe the interface, it doesn't appear so, but you need to do more thinking. You need to spend more development time, more time with users when they're more challenging environments, and simply cutting off what exists for students and learners in rich places in order to make it cheaper is an approach that is destined for failure.
Thank you so much, Mike. And I mean, I think we've covered such a range of things in this panel already, and I can't actually quite believe how fast the time has flown by for me. I wonder if, maybe we could end on this point, which is that all of this conversation and all of this kind of ambition to move for transformation can feel overwhelming, and we're acknowledging that it can be overwhelming, all of this. And maybe I can come back to you, Geeta, as the one who kind of led us through those findings. Is there anything that we can say to help decision makers with that overwhelm and to engage with this long-term vision and all of these points that Mike has just taken us through as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that I'm seeing is, I suppose, if you want to try and get out of that hamster wheel where you're always trying to chase where things are going, the way that you can get ahead of that is to jump ahead of the hamster wheel and then have a vision of where you want to go. So by having a vision of where you want to go, and it doesn't have to be utopian, it doesn't have to be dystopian, it can be something in the middle that feels like a world you personally want to live in. If you've got that, and if you bring people around to create that vision, then it's a lot easier to get people to say, that's where I want to go, and therefore these are the things that we need to do. So I think that can really help with the overwhelm of, instead of trying to keep up with all the other realities and visions people are building, try and start by building the world you want to live in and the people you work with want to live in. And that's what you can then use as a guide to build it.
Thank you, Geeta. And any final thoughts from others on our panel before we close off this part of the webinar? No, we've covered a whole load of different things, and I want to say thank you very much, Lee, Mike, Daniel, Geeta, for all of your responses, thoughtful input, and responding to as much as we could, responding to the questions in the Q&A, as diverse as they were. So thank you all for taking part. Now we'd love to hear from you, the attendees. We're going to use this poll function again, which I saw that everybody was very, very able to use at the beginning of the webinar. And we're going to just run some very quick questions. And if we have time, I might pick one or two people to come off mute and input as well. So you should see a poll that's just popped up on your screen asking you which topic feels the most neglected when we're talking about AI in the education in the age of AI. And so what feels most neglected? What would we regret not focusing on at this point today in 2025? I'm going to give everybody, I don't know, 30 seconds to click a thing. And we're just really interested to see the range of responses once again. Brilliant. I can see that, yeah, I can see that nearly 40% of people, 45%, oh, it's shooting up. Okay, a lot of people have now started to input, and I'm seeing I'm never sure if people can see the poll if it's just me, but the kind of one really leading ahead is around supporting teachers. And I think we've got enough time. I'd love for somebody who's said supporting teachers to maybe raise your hand, and then you'll be able to come off mute and just tell us why. Why did you choose that one? Why do you think that's being neglected or not being focused on enough? And it's going to be first come, first served. Whoever raises their hand first gets to speak. I love my enthusiasm. I mean, my optimism there. I thought people were going to all immediately raise their hands. Are they able to? Maybe that's the first question I should ask. Are people currently able to raise their hand?
Yes, they can.
They are?
Yeah.
Okay. And do we have anybody who's raised their hand? No. Okay. Yes. Lovely, Nariman. Thank you so much. Can you tell us why you chose what you chose in the poll?
Hi, thank you. And it's a lovely conversation, extremely inspiring. Thank you all. I think I was choosing something around reimagining the role of school and education, right? I think there are all the other topics were things I'm thinking that I'm seeing conversations around. You know, we can easily assess whether it's where the level of this conversation is, where the levels of the trials or the tinkering, as Michael called it. But I think this idea of that we're already after 200 years of modern schooling, there's already a lot of criticism around what modern schooling is and what have we learned from it that is not working and the inequities and injustices that have been created, besides, of course, all the gains. And I wonder, it's kind of like we're building on a particular legacy of human experience and knowledge, right? And we're introducing, whether it's actually tech at large or AI in particular, we're introducing it to what we know how to do in education so far. But it's not like this massive human experience of putting everyone in school has particularly succeeded brilliantly everywhere. It succeeded to large extents, and it has a lot of ways to go, just as pure regular schooling, right? And so if we're building on that with the injustices that are already inherent in it, and we're introducing new tools without also reimagining and having the necessary conversations around where have we also not did well as a humanity in this massive human experiment of making sure everybody learns in a modern school, right? So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, it did, and this came up in our research as well. It's so interesting how it's also a very divisive thing. Some people will find that very, very nerve-wracking idea to really take that step and reimagine learning, and others felt much more comfortable entering into that headspace. So thank you for that input. I'm gonna take one more person's raised hand, and then we're gonna do a couple more polls. So I think we have Omar Shani.
Hi there. Thank you all. It's a very interesting panel discussion. I think my response was teacher development and teacher support as a key driver of success here, because teachers sustain our systems, and especially in terms of developing countries. And I think much of the change that is coming, our learners leave the system, whereas teachers stay in the system for 10, 15, 20, 30 years even. So we're looking for ways in which we can engage how teaching is done in the 21st, 22nd century. And we're looking for ways in which that can be done in a sustained way. And the only way to do that is to support teachers more adequately. And as I think Gita was saying earlier on, it's about alleviating some of the stresses that teachers are feeling. And one of it is, you know, being overwhelmed by the dearth of edtech that's coming on the scene, coupled with the tools, coupled with the new trend now, which is AI in education. So now it's looking at so many different things, and the needle keeps being pushed. And how do we support the teachers adequately to do their jobs?
Thank you so much, both of you, for coming off mute. And I know it can be a little nerve-wracking to do that in this webinar format. So thank you for that. And it's great because you both touched on the highest scoring. So actually the highest scoring was reimagining the purpose of learning. That was 46%, and supporting teachers was 35%. So it's so great to hear a little bit about why you chose that and where you're thinking, why you're thinking that. I'm going to just run a second poll now for everybody. And this time, we're kind of flipping the question. So what should we avoid working on? And you'll see it's got the same list of things that I'm really interested and intrigued to see where we fall this time around. So please click the one you think we should avoid. And if we have time, I'll take one person to share why they've chose that. Very interesting. People are taking a little bit more time to respond to this one. First one felt like a flurry. This one we have 17% have participated so far. Okay, I'll give you another 30 seconds to respond. Don't worry, it's not like, you know, this is the only time this question is ever being asked, but we're interested to know what you think. Okay, and while we're just wrapping that up, while people are still putting in their final votes, maybe I can just invite the first person to raise their hand will get a chance to just say why in 30 seconds. All right, yeah, we have Nishita who has put her hand up. Please jump in.
Hi. This was a tough one. I wasn't looking forward to picking one of them, but I picked the assessing personalized adaptive tools because I work with a community. I work on edtech for Rohingya refugees that are in Cox's Bazar of Bangladesh, and you know, they speak a language that is just an oral language, and it's oftentimes very hard to find materials for supporting instruction in the classroom. And what I find to be more useful is that if the teachers are doing the personalization and adapting their teaching in the classroom, that works very well with the learners who are responding to that connection they have with the teacher and so on and so forth. And so, you know, having technology tools address that is not a bad thing, but teachers also play a pretty big role, especially in communities where their language and culture is underrepresented in the content and materials that are available. So yeah, that's why I chose that one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I wish we had more time to dig into it, because I can see also the poll has now ended, and just by a fraction, we actually have the winner being that ensuring learners have the skills for the future, which is a very controversial one. We hear a lot of different points of view on that one. So thank you all for taking part in the poll. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly flash up a final slide just to tell you a little bit about what's happening next. And actually, Jill, let's do this last poll at the very end, just for those who can stay on, and they can give us this. But I'm just going to flash up this slide so that you can see the report we've been talking about and see a little bit of what's happening next. So I will just start speaking. Hopefully that slide is going to come up in a second. Basically, really the message we wanted to say is this is just the beginning, right? We'd love to stay in touch with all of you and everyone who's here on our progress. Our goal is to narrow the learning divide in the age of AI. So we've talked a lot about the risks. We've talked a lot, and we are very, very aware of those. And that's really our goal, is to narrow that learning divide. So next, what we'll be doing is testing our ideas on how to do that. And some of the things we talked about today are what we're hoping to be able to test. So if you scan that QR code in the top right corner, then that'll take you directly to this full report we've been talking about, and you hopefully can dig into much more of the detail. And I'd love to encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, because we'll be hosting a number more of events like these, discussions and opportunities to connect with others in this space. So that's what's happening next for us. Thank you once again for coming. If you have another minute or two to spare, we're going to launch a final poll, which asks you who you think we should be speaking to. So who do you think is in this space, who's doing brilliant work, who we should be speaking to? And there'll be a sort of text box that you can just type into, and let that be your parting gift to us. Thank you once again for coming. And thank you to all our panelists for your input and the really, really vibrant discussion. Once again, I see a couple of people have done it, which is brilliant. If just as you're leaving, you want to add in the text box who you think we should be speaking to, then please do. And don't forget to scan the QR code. And once you're done with that, you can feel free to leave the event. And once again, thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming.
And for those looking for the link to the report, I think if you follow EdTech Hub on LinkedIn, we should be able to share there as well.
I'm hoping this QR code takes us there. Maybe that's fake news. No, it is, right?
It does.
Yeah, great. So lots of ways to find the report. And exactly as Gita said as well, please do follow us on LinkedIn. We're posting stuff weekly at the moment, opinion pieces and more. So great. I can see over 50% of people have given us someone that they think we should be speaking to, which is great. So for the last 20 or so, I'm going to give you maybe one more minute to add your thoughts, and then I'm probably going to close the webinar. Hey, the poll is closed. Thank you all for coming, and see you very soon.